All right. Good morning, family. It's good to be together as the Church of God. Amen. We have 3 children. As most of you know, we have 2 girls with a boy stuck right in the middle of those 2 girls. And our youngest turned 20 yesterday. I know I don't look that old. What a precious soul she is. I want to talk to you about our daughters, these beautiful beings that God has given us. Because if we're going to be faith-driven families, we need to raise our daughters to be spiritual champions. Wouldn't you agree? They need to know biblically what that looks like. There's a book out called Captivating, Unveiling the Mystery of a Woman's Soul by John and Stacy Eldridge. Quote, you see, every little girl, every little boy is asking one fundamental question, but they are very different questions depending on whether you are a little boy or a little girl. Little boys want to know, do I have what it takes? That's the question. All that rough and tumble, all that daring and superhero dress up, all of that is a boy seeking to prove that he does have what it takes. He was made in the image of a warrior God. Nearly all of a man does is fueled by his search for validation, that longing he carries for an answer to this question. Little girls, though, am I lovely? The twirling skirts, the dress up, the longing to be pretty, to be seen, that's what that's all about, Stacy writes. We're seeking an answer to our question. When I was a little girl, maybe 5 years old, she says, I remember standing on top of the coffee table in my grandparents' living room, singing my heart out. I wanted to capture attention, especially my father's attention. I wanted to be captivating. We all did. But for the most part, the answer to our question when we were young was no. There is nothing captivating about you. Get off the coffee table. Nearly all that a woman does in her adult life is fueled by her longing to be delighted in, her longing to be beautiful, to be irreplaceable, to have her question answered yes. And down in the depths of our heart, she says, our question remains unanswered. Or rather, it remains answered in the way that it was answered so badly in our youth. Am I lovely? Do you see me? Do you want to see me? Are you captivated by what you find in me? We live haunted by that question, yet unaware that it still needs an answer. End quote. Today, I want to encourage our awareness of the way that our daughters are designed. I want us to answer that question. Yes, we see you. Yes, you are captivating. Yes, you matter. And then we want to also accept that our job is to train that little girl to be a spiritual champion in this ugly world of sin. And as Christians, we should have the greatest desire that we raise our daughters to be Christ-like sisters, godly aunts, righteous mothers, faithful grandmothers. We see the blessing, don't we, that Timothy had in his mother and his grandmother in 2 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 5. For I am mindful, Paul says, of the sincere faith that is within you, which first dwelt in your grandmother Lois and in your mother Eunice, and I am persuaded it's in you as well. Timothy had that in those women. Our job then this morning is to understand them, to pave the way of righteousness so that these beautiful, unique beings can turn into that virtuous woman that was just read about in Proverbs 31, She looks well to the ways of her household. She does not eat the bread of idleness. Her children rise up and bless her, her husband also, and he praises her, saying, many daughters have done nobly, but you excel them all. Charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord, she shall be praised. Give her the product of her hands, and let her works praise her in the gates. Brethren, this morning, I want us to look at and discuss the uniqueness and the challenges of our daughters. First of all, you need to know that God made daughters unique on purpose. See, we know that a daughter's brain lights up in different places than our sons' brains do. As a matter of fact, speaking of our sons, about 8 weeks old, a boy receives a huge surge of testosterone, and it transforms him radically. A male has up to 20 times more testosterone than a female does. Therefore, he's into running and jumping and roughhousing and making loud, weird noises and shooting things. Our daughter's brain is larger, better networked neurologically. Congratulations, sisters. And therefore, its communication and emotional centers remain strongly intact. Therefore, it makes our daughters, our sweet daughters, more expressive, more emotional. They feel more deeply and they cry more often, and they're far better at reading character and motives. Their brain underwent an estrogen bath early on, literally called the intimacy hormone, creating a desire for bonding and nurturing and communication. One doctor writes a book, her book's called The Female Brain, and here's what she says, quote, what if the communication center is bigger in one brain than the other? What if the emotional center is bigger in one than the other? What if one brain develops a greater ability to read cues in people whose reality dictated that communication, connection, emotional sensitivity, and responsiveness, and they were primary values? This person would prize these qualities above all others and be baffled by a person whose brain didn't grasp the importance of these qualities. In essence, you would have someone with a female brain. See, it's wonderful. It's a wonderful thing to raise a daughter. They're sweet, they're precious, they're smart, they're sensitive, they're nurturing, they're emotionally charged, and they're a blessing. Listen now. David says in Psalm 127 and verse 3, behold, children are a heritage from the Lord. See, your world doesn't say that to you, has not said that to you. We have become a society that says children really don't matter. You can do with them what you want. That's not what God says. We actually live in a world that kind of makes fun of people who have lots of kids even. Why is that? Well, because the more you have and the more tied down you are. That's not what God says. God says that children are a heritage from the Lord. And here's what he says. The fruit of the womb is a reward, and like arrows in the hand of a warrior, so are the children of one's youth. Happy is the man whose quiver is full of them. That's what God says. David said in Psalm 144 and verse 12, then our sons in their youth will be like well-nurtured plants, and our daughters will be like pillars carved to adorn a palace. Let me give you 4 crucial things within this idea right here to remember about your daughters. Number 1, your daughter is wonderfully unique. She is a daughter like a pillar carved to adorn a palace. She is uniquely made. Number 2, your daughter needs constant communication. My girls, when they were little, they always wanted to tell me something. That's not happenstance. That's their need to communicate. They need to know that they are being heard. by their dad. Stay interested in them. Your daughter's wonderfully unique. She needs constant communication. Your daughter needs constant understanding. 1 Peter 3:7 says, husbands, likewise dwell with your wives with understanding, giving honor to the wife as the weaker vessels. Your daughters, our daughters will be that wife who needs that understanding. And number 4, your daughter needs constant, continual affirmation. They're not trying to get your attention to just aggravate you. I know that's how it feels, but they need your affirmation. She needs you to communicate that she's lovely, valued, and noticed. God made them unique on purpose. Your daughter is a creation from God. Number 2, I want to talk to you about the challenges that our daughters face. They face difficult challenges, for sure. They, like all of us, face the challenge of culture. Cultural role models, actresses and singers and influencers, and all of them, a lot of them have a couple of things in common: wealth, fame, and usually sexual indecency. And that's before them every single day. Social media. Do you know that social media is causing a major, we are right in the center, whether you know it or not, we're right in the center of a major youth mental health crisis in our nation and in our world? You can avoid it all you want, or we can stick our heads in the sand, but you ask anyone in the medical field, and they'll let you know how critical it is for our children, how critical of a state that we are in with our daughters. And as smartphone and social media use increases, so does depression and anxiety. It is literally off the charts. Not to mention hypersexuality as the norm in our world. All kinds of mixed messages, even from other Christians, as they promote events in our culture that produce and promote unrighteous living and unrighteous thinking. It's a little dated, but I want you to listen to James Dobson, and he writes this in his book, Bringing Up Girls. He says, let me ask you some rhetorical questions to those who are raising girls. Do you hope that your daughters will be sexually promiscuous even from their early teen years? Well, certainly not, I can almost hear you saying, but indulge me for the purposes of this illustration, he says. Do you prefer that your daughters be brash, loud, aggressive in their relationships with males? I mean, do you hope that they will be easy marks for boys seeking sexual conquests? Is it your desire that they imitate rogue masculine behavior, such as being quick-tempered and immodest and insensitive and disrespectful to others? Do you want them to be foul-mouthed, crude, rude, profane, and discourteous? Is it your desire that they dress provocatively in order to attract the attention of guys, revealing more than they conceal? When they become teenagers, do you want them to look like prostitutes? Do you want them to be so ashamed of their bodies that they feel so compelled to diet at 9 years of age and are afraid to eat by 13? Are you comfortable with professors who encourage your nearly grown daughter to experiment with lesbian relationships and tell them that bisexuality is an even greater trip? Do you hope that your girls will learn that marriage is an outdated institution that should be redefined and discarded? Do you want them to disdain the cherished spiritual beliefs that you've been teaching them since they were babies? If these are your aspirations for your vulnerable little girls, and I'm sure that they're not, then you need do nothing to achieve them. Popular culture will do it for you. It is designed to turn this generation of kids into politically correct little media clones. This is what lies in the paths of children whose parents are overworked, distracted, exhausted, uninvolved, and I would add unintentional. So it brings on the challenge of purity within our daughters. Jesus said in Matthew 5 and verse 8, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." Don't you want your little girl, don't you want your granddaughter and your great-granddaughters to see Him? The idea is to experience Him. They have to be pure in heart to do that. Peter said in 1 Peter 1 that He who called you is holy. Be holy in all of your conduct. Be holy, for He is holy. Paul wrote in Ephesians chapter 5 and verse 3, "But among you there shouldn't even be a hint." This is what the NIV says. There shouldn't be even a hint of sexual immorality or any kind of impurity or greed, because these things are improper for God's holy people. The Bible teaches us in 1 Thessalonians 4 and verse 1, "Finally then, brethren, we request and exhort you in the Lord Jesus that you receive from us the instruction of how you ought to walk, that you excel still more. For you know what commandments I gave you by the authority of the Lord Jesus Christ. For this is the will of God." Listen closely to this. This is the will of God, your sanctification, that you should abstain from sexual immorality. That is a word there that's an all-encompassing word for everything outside the marriage that's sexual, that you should abstain from all of that, because it's the very will of God. For each of you, you know how to possess your own vessel in sanctification and honor. For God has not called us to the purpose of impurity, but for sanctification. And your daughters today are at risk. Christian parents who do not intentionally, and grandparents who do not intentionally train their daughters to live in the beauty of holiness will become quickly desensitized to this world of impurity. You must do this on purpose for them, and it must start when they are babies. If we sit back and do nothing, immorality becomes the norm, and it becomes acceptable because they have pressures from media and pressures from relationship and boyfriends and other girls with worldly mindsets, and they are bombarded with all of these challenges to be holy in an unholy world. And we better do this on purpose, because holiness doesn't come by accident. It never has, and it never will. And then there's the challenge of their self-worth. Speaking of challenges, to grow in them a strong self-worth. I didn't say self-esteem. That's not what I'm referring to. That's a worldly philosophy. Anti-Bible. Self-esteem is anti-Bible. But self-worth. Girls, our daughters are the most susceptible to a low self-worth, due usually to unhealthy training and a lack of love and affirmation from their parents. That's where they're going to get it. And the result of not building self-worth in our daughters comes at a huge price. If we don't intentionally build self-worth in them, they will naturally turn to self-abuse. Cutting and mutilation and piercing everything. And girls who symbolize darkness and death and rebellion and depression and attempted suicide. And of course, the teenage contagion known as the trans movement and all sorts of sexual activities. Prescription drug use, and we could go on and on. I will tell you, these things won't happen if moms and dads build in them biblical self-worth. Because all the while, our Creator lets us know, as David writes this psalm, "For you are created in my inmost being, and you knit me together in my mother's womb. And I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made, and your works are wonderful, and I know that full well. And my frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place. When I was woven together in the depths of the earth, your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me are written in your book before one of them even came to be. How precious to me are your thoughts, O God, how vast the sum of them. You're beautifully and wonderfully made." They're not going to get that from the world. They're going to get just the opposite. And so with the rest of our time today, I want to give you 5 principles for raising our daughters to be spiritual champions. I want to answer the so what. Because I know you want them in eternity. I know you want them with you. I know that you want them to have children that are spiritual champions. So here they are. Number 1, show her, mom and dad, show her that Jesus is your number 1 priority. Does she see that in you? Does she see that Jesus is first in your life? Does she have it implanted in her that kingdom living is number 1 for you? Does she know that Jesus comes even before your own spouse in your life? Because I will tell you, if Jesus is number 1 in your life, it's pretty probable that he will be number 1 in her life. Because that little girl will look up in the eyes of a mother and a father who can say, "You can live like us." As Paul told the church at Corinth, "Imitate me as I imitate." That word imitate is an interesting word. It's the idea of taking your finger and tracing a letter. Did you do that when you were little in school? I see these things now. Used to we would have dots of the letter A, and now they're impressions. Like they're dented. I don't know if they've caught on yet in schools, but it's to kind of keep your pencil going in the right direction. And he says, that's what I want you to be. That little girl can look at you and go, "I know exactly how Jesus would do it because that's how my dad would do it. I know exactly how Jesus would treat that person because that's exactly how my mom did it." Number 2, fathers, show her an abundance of value, attention, and affection. Man, dads, I hope you're writing this down. She will live the rest of her life trying to get this from you. "Steve, you don't understand. That's really not the kind of guy I am." Then become that kind of guy. Jesus asked you to sacrifice everything for him. The least you can do is hold her. And if she ever hugs you, you hug her until she stops. Make her let go first. And when she wants to sit on your lap and talk to you about a bunch of nonsense, you listen. as if the President of the United States called you. You do that, she'll never want to give her body to another man outside of marriage. Are you listening? Never. She doesn't need it. She's been fulfilled within her emotional heart life by you. You hold the key to this for your daughters and your granddaughters. Number 3, mothers. Show her how a woman devotes her heart to her God. Man, did God give my children a mother who did this and still does it to this day. But I prayed for that woman. I prayed that God would give me that woman over there. When I was a kid, I started praying for that. That God, I want a woman who really does display the heart of God before our children. And mothers, they need to see that in you. They need that lived out before them. They need to see how you control your attitude, and how you love the unlovable, how you relentlessly serve. They need to see that in you. How you are content to live for Jesus. How Jesus is enough for you in your life. Your daughters need to see it in you. I'm not saying we're perfect. Brethren, I know moms and dads, we're not perfect. I'm in the same boat. I'm not trying to be condescending in any way. I'm in the boat with you trying to do this stuff. But they need to see it lived out. They just can't hear the preacher talk about it on Sundays. That's a lot less powerful than seeing it in you on Monday through Saturday. Do you know this? Give me a head nod. Are you still with me? To see you live this out speaks so much more than their preacher saying it. Number 4, fathers, show her what kind of a man she should marry. Be that man. She won't have to wonder what to look for because she sees you. And number 5, mothers, teach that little girl early on what God's will is for how to love and respect your husband. Display that in front of her. They will likely do the exact same thing as you. Oh, if I could illustrate for you how many women that we have talked to, they're doing these, they later in life they go, I do that because I saw my mom do it. That's why I treat him that way, whether it's nice or it's ugly. That's why I treat him that way. Because I grew up with that. Moms, make sure that they're the ones who grow up and say, I treat him that way with the utmost respect. I willingly submit myself and place myself under his guidance and leadership because I saw my mom do it. She lived that for me. So I challenge you this morning. And we're going to put this on the screen. Our goal is not to raise a daughter who's a successful businesswoman or a beauty queen or most popular in school, nor are we raising a best friend. Let's stop right there. Oh, she might become that later in life. That's not your goal. To have her as your best friend. We are intentionally raising spiritual champions. That's women of God who have a longing to please the Lord in every way in their life. That's our goal. So when you have a daughter, if you have a granddaughter, That's God's woman right there. Bring her up to be a spiritual champion who loves the Lord more than anyone on this earth. And she will go to heaven with you. And she will bring a lot of other people with her, because that's how influential these little girls will become. We're here to love on you and to cry with you and to pray with you and to walk with you. If there's anything that we can help with, let us know as we stand and sing our invitation song together.